Good afternoon. Good to be back. I want to thank Dennis for asking me to fill in for him this week. He is out of town, so it's a pleasure being here. In doing so, I'd like, on behalf of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Board of Directors of the Pro Football Hall of Fame Luncheon Club, to call the order to the third meeting of our 62nd year of the Pro Football Hall of Fame Luncheon Club. Our invocation, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, will be given by Youth Pastor at North Canton Church of Christ, Anthony Ray. Anthony.
It's rather fortuitous, this opportunity, as your speaker this morning is a fantasy football expert, and I am currently on a three-week losing streak in our family. So perhaps this will help. Let us bow in prayer or take the position that you are most comfortable with. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with grateful hearts as we gather here, recognition of legacy and achievement. We thank you for the blessing of fellowship and for this opportunity to celebrate both the sport that we love and those who contribute to its ongoing history. We ask a blessing over this meal that we've just shared together, and we thank you for those who have prepared it and for this place that we gather. May our time together be filled with meaningful conversation, connection, inspiration as we honor the values and dedication and teamwork and perseverance exemplified here. Guide us as we reflect on the lessons of not just football, but of life and the importance of discipline, commitment, and sportsmanship. Help us to apply these lessons in our daily lives. May we leave here strengthened in body and in spirit and inspired to carry forward a legacy of greatness in all that we do. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. There's a note on Dennis's sheet here that says silence your cell phones. I want to recognize the folks here at the dais ahead of you, and to my far right, your left, is our secretary, Jim Linda Smith. You met Pastor Anthony Ray. My far left, your right, Pam Long, who is Bob's wife. Obviously our speaker today, Bob Long. And down in front here with SMG Network is TJ Downey. Crowd's gotten rougher since I left. There goes the mic. Our TVs aren't working today, so I wanted to verbally make sure we recognize our club sponsors and thank them for their ongoing support. Altman's Primetime Health Plan, Dr. Peter Ferguson, Chiropractor, Liberty Ford, the Marion Motley Memorial Scholarship Fund, the Bistro of Green, who is a new sponsor this year, and Wilkshire Golf Course, so thank them. Also, a couple of announcements before we get started today. Do we have any new members? I know Dennis has been recognizing, and this being our third week, I know we've had some new members. If we've got some new members, if you wouldn't mind standing or putting your hand up, we can recognize you. Got a couple back there. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to introduce a speaker in the future, you can do so. Just let RJ know, and we'll get that lined up for you. The best way to stay in touch with the club is through our Hall of Fame Luncheon Club Facebook page. If you're on there or have a relative or a friend that can get that information to you, all club announcements will be on the Facebook page, and There will not be any emails. I know in the past, RJ started sending out emails, but we're going to get all of our announcements on the Facebook page. Want to remind everybody the Marion Motley Memorial Scholarship Fund, which will be in the spring of 2025. We will be donating again $1,000 to that organization for the scholarships. Please see RJ if you're interested in financially supporting this, and more information will be forthcoming. And remember, if you have someone that wants to apply for that, that is for our club members available as well. Our speaker schedules, we've got a list of speaker schedules. Now they're changing from time to time. We've had some things we've had to move around. They are, I think Danny and Bobby were back there with the 50-50 drawings. I think they're still back there. If you want to pick one of those up, you can do that as well. Also, again, I know Dennis has mentioned this, out of respect for our speakers, please keep your personal conversations at your table to a minimum so everyone can hear what's going on. And lastly, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what's happened this past weekend in the world of sports. Can't let that go. Our Cleveland Guardians are Central Division champions. How about that? They clinched the playoff spot earlier in the week, and then this weekend they clinched the Central Division. So congratulations to them. That's a young team. Boy, I tell you, we've got hopefully a great future ahead of them. And some of the players are starting to play, and hopefully Quan will be back and healthy and take these guys to the next level. We'll see. But remember, keep rooting them on. Also, the Buckeyes had a big win this weekend, 49-14 over Marshall. Again, wasn't the greatest of opponents, but again, it's a good way to keep winning, and the schedule will definitely get tougher as we go. I was going to talk about the Browns, but they lost. You know, Bob will give you another reason to watch football because, you know, obviously there's a different way of watching football when you're in fantasy league. So that'll help you maybe get over the Browns a little bit. And then in high school level, I want to recognize in high school football, Minerva won their game this weekend. They broke a 33-game losing streak, and that's got to be great for those kids. I mean, that's tough. That's tough. So congratulations to Minerva. They really, I'm sure they were happy down there. All right, we've got $183 in the 50-50, so pull out your tickets, and I'll have Bob pull a ticket. I forgot to tell you, you'll make another friend here today. All right, the winning number is 583.
A lot of people are like
053. 583-053. 183 in the pot. Ozzy has the money. Wait a minute, I gotta look at mine. Once again, 583-053.
way in the back.
Way in the back? Okay.
Oh.
All right, see Ozzy, he's got your money.
Hey, wait.
All right. Next week, our speaker will be Carla Niles. He's a Jackson graduate. If you remember Jackson back in the day, he was a football player there and great athlete. He's a two-time Olympian in rugby. And so that should be very interesting with Carla Niles, having him here next week and being able to hear what he has to say and then ask some questions, because I'm sure that Olympic life is pretty cool. All right, it brings me now to the time where I get to have the honor of introducing our speakers, so I get paid twice this week for this. But it's a pleasure for me to do it because this guy's my best friend. We've known each other since junior high, and you know, we've been best man in each other's wedding. You know, those type of things. We've gotten taken some vacations together, which we're going to do here shortly as well. But wanted to make sure that I was the one that got a chance to introduce Bob, and so I wanted to read you a little bit about his background, and then he'll come up and I'm sure is going to give you a lot more information. But he's been playing fantasy football since 1986 and has been nationally recognized as a fantasy football expert since 2002. So it's been quite a while he's been doing this and doing it very successfully. Bob created a unique approach to the importance of identifying consistency in fantasy players and has used that knowledge to dominate in fantasy leagues. This has led him to numerous fantasy football titles against other fantasy experts. And it says here in his local leagues, I have to beg to differ on that one.
I knew this was coming.
All right. Anyways, Bob has written numerous large fantasy football sites, or for numerous fantasy football sites like Creative Sports, Fox Sports, Fanball, and Roto Experts, just to name a few. He currently appears often as an expert guest on Sirius Radio's Fantasy Sports Channel. So if you have Sirius XM, you can catch him on the Fantasy Sports Channel. He currently has his own fantasy football site, and that's BigGuyFantasySports.com, and a lot of great information there as well. Bob publishes his annual fantasy football consistency guide. Now, the word consistency, I know he's going to talk about this, is just a unique way of drafting and watching your players throughout the year and hopefully gaining an edge with that consistency. The guide was chosen by Fantasy Sports Writers of America as the best fantasy football publication in 2018. So it was nationally recognized for that, and that guide has been nominated for 7 straight years. So congratulations for that as well. Bob created the King's Classic Fantasy Football Expert Draft in 2018. The draft is held here in Canton in August. The King's Classic brings together 42 of the top fantasy football experts from across the world, not just the United States, but the world, to compete for the best of the best. Bob started the Fantasy Football Expo in 2019, and if you haven't heard about that, you're missing out, which is held here in Canton every August. The Expo brings in over 50 of the top fantasy football experts from across the country together to share their knowledge and unique expertise with others. It is a big event here in Canton. The 2024 event, which we just had here in August, had over 50 exhibitors and sponsors and over 750 attendees that came into town for that. And the website for that is the fantasyfootballexpo.com if you want to find out more information. And then on a personal note, Bob and I years ago did a fantasy football show together on a couple local radio stations, and that was a lot of fun as well to be able to share what we know and obviously what he knows about fantasy football. So without further ado, please give a Pro Football Hall of Fame Luncheon Club welcome to my good friend Bob Luncheon.
I knew Frank was going to bring up the whole concept about who has won more titles in our local league, and it is Frank. I'll talk about that a little bit later. First off, I wanted to just thank the Hall of Fame Luncheon Club, the board, and RJ Van Allman for reaching out to me to ask me to be here. This is truly an honor to me. As a longtime resident of this area, and being this guy's best friend for 50 years, I know all about it. And I know what a great organization this is, and I someday hope to get here that I can start coming to these every week as well. But once again, thank you everyone for allowing me to be here today. So I have, as Frank said, I have 2 lives. I have a real life and I have a fantasy life. My real life is I'm actually a CPA by day. I know, surprising. A numbers guy would be into fantasy football. Yeah, it kind of works out that way, but it doesn't mean that. Again, I'm lifetime resident, born and raised in East Part, Ohio, in Sandy Valley. Hung out with this guy for the last 50 years, so that's my real life. And of course, I've been married 35 years, right? Behind every great man, there's got to be a great woman, right? You can't be successful without a great woman, and this beautiful woman to the left of me is why I've been able to do this for the last 35 years. Don't get me wrong, when we're somewhere and I say to anyone, do you play fantasy footballs? I can actually hear her eyes roll in the back of her head at that moment because she knows what's coming. It's going to be a long conversation. She better go sit down. It's going to take a while. But going back to the fantasy life. So the fantasy life, where did this all begin? As Frank said, 1986, which is long before the internet and long before fantasy football was cool. And I'll get into the history of fantasy football so you can see that, you know, it actually started even farther back than that, and I'll tell you a little bit about that history. But in 1986, a good friend of ours named Lynn Finley, if any one of you worked at Timkins over the last 20, 30 years, you may know who Lynn Finley is. He came home with this book by a gentleman named Chris Charpentier. And it was basically just called Playing Fantasy Football, the basics. So for those of you who may or may not know about it, in fact, anybody in here play actually in a fantasy football league right now? Now the next question is, how many people here know somebody who plays in a fantasy football league? Yeah. It's a big deal, and again, I'll get into the numbers a little bit later. But in 1986, we read this book, my friend and I, Lynn, and I said, we should do this. This looks like fun. And what fantasy football basically is, you get 10 to 12 people together, and you draft the NFL players that are playing in today's game. That team is your team to manage, and everything they do in a football game, whether it's stats-wise, rushing yards, passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, whatever, points are related to that, and you're putting your team against somebody else's team every week, and you basically play a full NFL season till about week 14. Then you have playoffs during the last 4 to 5 weeks of the season, and that's how you play, and then you become fantasy champion. And then, like Frank, will brag and talk and tell everybody how he beats, this nationally recognized expert, allegedly, in fantasy football all the time. I won't get into a lot. Frank got into a lot of stuff, so let me just move right into, why is fantasy football so damn popular? Well, first off, number one reason, the NFL football is damn popular. Everybody watches it. Everybody, whether you play fantasy or not, you play fantasy, you watch football. Whether it's the Browns, the Steelers, it doesn't matter who your team is. We got a Bengals fan down here, I see. You're going, you watch, you follow your team. So when fantasy football came into play, a lot of people, especially myself, in the mid-'80s, now the Browns were pretty good then. We had our dual backfield, Biner and all those guys, and Kozar, so we were pretty good. But we certainly have had our years. And so I always tell people, I play fantasy football because I'm a Browns fan. Because at least if my Browns are going to get beat, I'm hoping I have the quarterback on the other team so my fantasy team at least wins. Now, if I draft a bunch of Browns, then I got to double lose. So I usually don't draft a lot of Browns. Just more of a bias than anything. Interestingly enough, out of 100 of the top television telecasts in 2023, anybody want to guess how many of those are NFL football games? 93. So if that doesn't tell you how popular NFL football is, I don't know what does. 93 out of 100 of the top telecasts in 2023 were NFL football games. And not like the Super Bowl is always one of the top. It's not just the Super Bowl, it's all NFL games. That tells you right there. In 2023, over 60 million people played fantasy football. That's how big it's become. It is now an $11 billion industry. Now, I don't make that kind of money. That's why I still have a full-time job. But it just tells you how popular it is. If you include 13 to 17-year-olds, so that was just 18 and older, Now we're seeing younger and younger kids being involved because they're playing with their dads or their moms in a league. That's another 5 million added to that 60. So 65 million over the age of 13 played fantasy football last year. And I mentioned moms. Yes, moms do play fantasy football. Is it a dominantly, male? Yes. But in just 4 years, from 2019 to 2023, it went from 19% women to 35% women playing fantasy football. So the ladies are getting into it. They love their football anyway. They're in with their dads, their husbands, their friends, their coworkers. It's all great stuff. So what's the number 2 reason why fantasy football is so popular? Well, let's be honest. And I know I wouldn't even have to ask for the raising of hands here. But we all know how to run our football team a hell of a lot better than the guys that are doing it in Cleveland right now or wherever you're a fan of. We don't even have to ask for the raising of hands. We all can do a much better job. And that's the fun of it. We draft our own team. We run our own. Frank's a 6-time champion. I know damn well he can go up there and take over that team and make it run a heck of a lot better than what we saw yesterday against the New York Giants. One of the best things, though, of all of this is the whole idea of camaraderie and fellowship. There's nothing more fun than getting a bunch of friends together and having a fantasy football draft and trash talking about who you got, who you didn't get, and why this guy's going to be better, why this player's going to be this. And if you win and you beat your friends, Frank, how much trash talk do you give me in our 50 years? A lot. Damn right he does. So that's the fun, getting together, whether it's coworkers. How many people that usually have a league at their work that they play again with a bunch of the friends in the work? And sometimes they have multiple leagues if they're a big enough company, and that's the fun, is that camaraderie, that fellowship. And even if you draft online, which is obviously more common because people live in different parts of the country, we do our draft online now because we have people in Detroit, we have people in all over the state of Ohio. We used to always draft together. In fact, when we had our first draft in 1986, we called ourselves the Hall of Fame Fantasy Football League. Why? Because we held our first draft at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, this was quite an interesting conversation, and Frank knows this. So I called the Hall of Fame and said, hey, we would like to use your boardroom. Because they didn't have the gold jacket lounge. They didn't, it was still pretty small back then, but they had a boardroom. And the lady's like, well, I don't know. I said, it's on a Saturday, so it shouldn't have anybody, there. Well, I'll have to have Pete Elliott call you back, or John Bankert. Well, we already knew John Bankert because he was a Sandy Valley grad. So I get a phone call, and they're like, why do you want the board meeting or the boardroom on this specific Saturday? And I said, we want to have a fantasy football draft. You would have thought I just spoke German to John Bankert at that time, because John's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I go, it's not important, John. We just want to use the room. And so he said, fine, just pay your membership, pay the fee to get in the door, which I think was like $8 then. And so we all went, we paid, and we used the boardroom. And we were so excited because we were standing in front of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, stand, and we were like, making our first round picks. Didn't have cell phones, didn't think about recording it, which would have been brilliant. But that was our first draft. And we actually held that draft at the Pro Football Hall of Fame for a number of years. And to this day, I think we're one of probably the top 1% of longest running, because next year will be our 40th anniversary of our league. We still have the same scoring method, which is touchdown only, which is why Frank wins all the time. And we aren't going to change because we want to stay true to our roots. So I know people kind of make, fantasy football. This just started like in the last 15, 20 years, right? Nope. It was actually started in 1962-63. It was created by one of the minority owners of the Oakland Raiders back in the day. And he put together the GOPPPL, the Goppelful. It was the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League. How's that for a mouthful? I think HOFL's quite a bit. That was a doozy. But that was their league. They created that. They had their first draft. Anybody want to guess who the number 1 pick was in 1963? Jim Brown was second. Bart Starr, no. Namath, no. You'll understand when I say it. George Blanda. Why? Because he was also a kicker and got double point. He was the Shohei Ohtani of the fantasy football world in 1963 because he was a kicker and the quarterback for the then Oakland Raiders of the time. So he was the first pick. So that's always, everybody, Jim Brown was second, by the way, so you were very close. Like I said, it went more mainstream in the 1980s. Chris Charpentier put out the book. Things started to happen, but it still was very slow in moving along. I mean, we didn't know anybody else who played this league at the time. In 1988, there was a computer software created. It wasn't online. We're still not at the internet yet, but it was created by a small software company, and it was actually bought out by Miller Lite Brewing Company. And they called it the Miller Brewing Statistics. That's what it was. It was you could go, you download, you bought the software, and here's the funny thing, you had to go to a local Miller Lite distributor to get it. They didn't even sell it in the mainstream. So I think we did it our first few years. We went and got it so we could run our league on that thing. And so every week we printed out 12 pages for the 12 owners and mailed them in 12 envelopes with 12 stamps so they would get them by Wednesday we mail it Wednesday so they get it by Friday. And then when we came home for church every Sunday, we had 43 phone messages of everybody setting their lineups. And it would be like, beep, hey Bob, I'm starting, whoever at the time, Dan Marino, and then 5 minutes later, beep, hey, this is Frank again. Guess what? This guy got hurt. I just saw it on the pregame, because again, we didn't have internet. We just had the television, and whatever was on TV, the pregame was all the information you got back in the day. If you didn't hear it there, if you didn't watch the pregame because you were too busy, you probably had a lot of guys who started who didn't even play in the football game. But every week, that's how we did it until online software came in 1997. Yahoo and CBS Sportsline created it, but then it really broke in 2000 when CBS Sportsline became the first official NFL provider of fantasy football stats. At that point, boom, 6,500 leagues signed up on that software. But that's only 78,000 people if you take 12 teams. It still was pretty slow. Where have we come from the last 12 to 15 years? Well, cell phones with apps that give you instantaneous data. I know by the second how my teams are doing, and I can watch them on my phone, my computer, whatever. Obviously, technology has made it. Like I said, now it's an $11 billion industry backed by the NFL. They have their own NFL fantasy sites. They have their own, television shows, podcasts, and now it's boomed into what it's become today. So how does fantasy football, Canton, Ohio, Pro Football Hall of Fame, and me all come together? Well, Frank kind of talked about it already. In 2016, I contacted the Hall of Fame with my idea of trying to do something with fantasy football. And we put together what was called the Fantasy Football Experience. It was a one-day event. I brought in 5 of the top experts in the country. They brought in Warren Moon, Anthony Munoz, and Chris Dolman. And we had a fantastic day because we could talk with the fantasy experts and then say, all right, Warren Moon, what do you think of this quarterback in this system? And you got a whole different analysis, and it was outstanding. That then turned into 2018, as Frank mentioned, where we brought in the King's Classic, which was all of the best experts in the country, came to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We drafted live, and SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio came from New York and broadcasted live for 6 hours from the Hall of Fame. We were the 3rd highest trending Twitter on that day. Everybody was listening to the show, and it's been a huge success. We actually expanded into a 3rd league in 2020 due to COVID. And we actually have 7 international experts from England, Mexico, Canada, South Africa, Australia, and Ireland are also part of this thing. So it is a global, worldwide thing. As we know, the NFL keeps growing globally as well. Fantasy football is doing the same. In 2021, or in 2019, like I said, I put together the Fantasy Football Expo. We brought in about 30 booths, 30 experts then, about 30 booths. We had 75 people show up. Not a great start. We held it at the Cultural Center because we didn't, the Hall of Fame wasn't ready for anything, I didn't have the room there that I thought I was going to need. But with 75 people, I guess I could have done it. But 2020 came, COVID. 2021 comes, are we even going to be able to pull this off? What's happening in the world? And so I finally decided to open it up. Vaccinations were here. And if COVID did one good thing, at least for me, is that it kept people in the house for a year and a half, and everybody wanted out. So 500 people showed up to our expo in 2021. And then in 2023, Des Bryant, former Cowboys wide receiver, came to town. He had a new software app game, fantasy game he wanted to promote. And guess what? We got him to play in our flag football tournament. Guess what? He won. But he did not play wide receiver. He played quarterback. They still won. Didn't matter. He's a left-handed. He's a really good thrower, by the way. Frank was there. Last year, we also added 3 new King's Classics. We added a Queen's Classic, which is 14 of the top female experts in the country. We have Dynasty and IDP as well, which is individual. So we have now 6 leagues of the best drafting live in the Pro Football Hall of Fame that weekend. And as Frank said, last year, in 2024, 750 people showed up. And the amazing thing is 80% of the folks that attend are from out of state. Not just out of county, out of state. We have 25 people last year that came from California. We've had people come from Ireland. Lots of people from Mexico and Canada, of course, because they're close. But it's really become quite a thing. And so that in itself, working with Visit Canton, the Visitor Bureau's Pro Football Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame Village, we have brought about $750,000 per year in revenue, tourism revenue, the week after Hall of Fame. So what used to be a very dead time here in Canton, Ohio, because after Hall of Fame, it kind of just went, everybody leaves and you're like, okay, back to normal. But now we have all these people coming. We sell out the Doubletree Hotel, usually in about 3 weeks when we open up tickets, because that's the host hotel and everybody wants to stay there. So we've worked out a great deal with them. They pass that along to the attendees. Everybody raves about it, and we'll continue to make this as successful as we can to continue to bring those people here. So that's all really I have. I'm honored to be here today. I'm honored to be able to help my city with this event, and I'm still to this day amazed and blessed that we've this has actually worked, and I can do this here. And once again, thank you, Frank. RJ, thank you for having me, and I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm sure he has some because of his teams, but we'll address them. But once again, thank you for the time today. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Oh, geez.
Way to back. Yes, sir.
Do you have your own platform, or do you use one of the other online services?
So in the 20 leagues that I play in, I use all of them: ESPN, NFL.com, Yahoo, My Fantasy League. Is that what you're talking about, league management? Yeah, Sleeper is another one we use quite a bit. So there's a lot of them out there. A lot of it just depends on the people in your league. If it's an older group, you might want to use My Fantasy League because it's more kind of just very simple and basic. Sleeper is more all on your phone and everything else in between. But there's really good ones. NFL.com is free. ESPN.com, their league management is free. And they do a very good job. We've been on ESPN with our home league now since 2010. Yeah, so we've been on a long time. So thank you.
How much time do you have to spend to be, have a good time?
So the question is, how much time do I have to spend to enjoy my fantasy football world? I'm not going to let my wife answer this because it probably won't sound good. I spend way too much time. When you throw in writing the book, which I do from January 1st to April 30th and all this, it's probably a second full-time job. I'm probably putting in at least 1,000 hours a year, or at least a good part-time job. But it's one of those labor of love, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys have hobbies, woodworking, gardening, whatever, right? And you put your passion into it because that's what you do outside of work. My hobby is fantasy football, and it just became something bigger than I thought it would ever. But to me, it's no different. It's just that love, that passion. I never look at it as work. I look at it as the excitement of me putting a book out every year, and people enjoy it, and they buy it on Amazon, and it's been recognized 7 straight years as one of the best. So, it's just one of those passion scenarios where it's hard to give up. I mean, it's certainly going to be a lot of fun when I do officially retire, that I can maybe spend more time, which I'm sure my wife just rolled her eyes. But yeah, it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot of time and commitment, but it's a lot of fun too. So. Yes, sir.
So what's your system?
What's my system? Oh, the consistency.
Not
All
the
right.
cat. I'm assuming it's not the cat on the commercial.
What's that?
I'm assuming it's not the cat on the commercial.
Oh, yeah. No, so like I said, the consistency system that I created was if you play fantasy football, you want players that score a lot of points, which is obvious, but some score 30 points one week, 5, 7, 30, and that's an inconsistent player. So most of the weeks, when you get to 30 points, certainly you should win that week, but then the other 2 weeks. So at the end of the year, so in 2002, when I was in Frank and Mine's league, I had Sean Alexander, who that year was the league MVP. He rushed for 15 touchdowns. My team was the third highest scoring points team in the league. I didn't make the playoffs. I was 7-7 in the regular season. And the reason why was he scored 5 touchdowns in one game, 3 touchdowns in another game, 2 touchdowns in another game. So 2/3 of his touchdowns that he scored, and we're in a touchdown-only league, was only 3 out of the first 14 games. The other 11 was split up between 5. So I calculated that if Sean Alexander would have scored 1 or 2 touchdowns a week every week, I would have won more games, made the playoffs, won the championship, and that's where it all kind of came about, of putting together a system that calculates the consistency of the players based on their fantasy performance. So like last year, Lamar Jackson won the league MVP. He was 4th in total points, but he was only 56% consistent, which meant half the games he wasn't scoring enough to be even worthy of being your quarterback on your starting team. That's the stuff that I track. That's what people like, because I'm the only one out there that really does this. Tristan Cockroft started the whole consistency concept in 1999 before I came up with my version. But my version I took to a whole new level with the book, and my website has tools that you can put in your own scoring method, tells you how consistent your players are and your scoring method, and it really helps identify those, and that's what I found to be successful, and that's why I share it with everyone else. So, yes, sir.
How much money could a person win in this fantasy football?
How much money can a person win in fantasy football? Well, that's a very good question. So there's also something out there called daily fantasy sports. It is a big deal, and basically all you're doing is you're picking who you think are the best players for that 1 week. So consistency is completely out of the question. Nothing to do with it. You want the guys who are going to score all the biggest points that week. Those games, now they have hundreds of thousands of people participating in one contest, but you can win $1 million if you beat them all. Now, you might have a better chance of getting hit by lightning twice and winning the lottery with the ticket in your hand at the same time, but at least you have a chance. And so that's what, now, of course, legalized betting is becoming a thing, which, we always had it, but it was never really, quote, legalized. Now they have it, but so in the fantasy world, they have something called prop bets, which is you're betting on the over or under of a person's specific stats. So let's say yesterday, Derrick Henry was 75.5 rushing yards. Well, if you bet the over, he had 150, you won some money. So I do that more than anything because I'm more stats-based versus like betting the lines or betting the over-unders of the game scores. But yeah, there's people out there winning millions of dollars. There's a tournament that they have every year on software called Underdog, and if you win $3 million. Now you're competing against, again, hundreds of thousands of people, but the first place person at the end of the season wins $3 million. There's a lot of money to be made, but it's, again, you might be better off buying a lottery ticket and have a better chance. Yes, sir.
Do you think your consistency stats would translate to evaluating NFL point spreads?
Not really, because I'm looking at the particular individual, not a team. Because again, a person can have a great fantasy day, like Amari Cooper yesterday. He had a great fantasy day. If you're an Amari Cooper owner, you're happy. As a Browns fan, the rest of the team sucked. So, so it doesn't really equate well. Sometimes you draft bad or good players on bad teams. Like Deontay Johnson now plays for the Panthers. Now they have a real quarterback. He had a huge day in fantasy yesterday, but Panthers are still a bad team. But because they're a bad team, they're always playing from behind, which means they're always throwing the football, which means the receivers are catching a lot. So it all equates. So it's really hard to really look at the football lines and the teams, but the players, that's why I like the prop bets, because you can bet the individual stats of the players, and that's what more I'm kind of into. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Bob, in your opinion, who was the number one pick this year?
Well, the number one pick was Christian McCaffrey, but I didn't draft him in any leagues because of the Madden curse. If you don't think that's real, ask any fantasy player who has seen every guy that in the fantasy world go on, Peyton Hillis, we can go on and on. He's a great player when he's healthy. The problem is he just can't stay healthy anymore. But, that's the fun of putting that stuff out there. Is, you take a chance and you have to make that decision of who to pick and when to pick them. And, and if you're new and if you want to get into it and you're new to it, just ask somebody for help. Heck, ask me. Contact Frank. He'll give you my email. I'll be more than happy to help anybody who needs the help in their leagues. I never help Frank, 'cause that's why he wins. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, sir, in the back.
Do they have college fantasy football?
Yes, they do. They have college fantasy football. So if you're a college lover of the game, yes, you can draft college players every week, play in a league. They usually do it more DFS style, which is that daily fantasy, where you pick your favorite players each week. Drafting all of the college players, there's a lot of college players to choose from, so that might be difficult. But you can certainly have fun, maybe doing just a Big Ten only league, where you just draft players from that. But yes, college fantasy is also one of the fastest growing fantasy sports at this point because of the fact that there's so many people who love their college football, that's for sure. Yes, sir.
How about high school?
Well, so high school, yes. He's asking what about fantasy sports for high school? So believe it or not, I thought of the same idea a number of years ago. And who was it? Was it Jim Craig? Wasn't he part of the Ohio?
Oh yeah, Jim Craig.
Yeah. So Jim Craig may know who he is. He was part of the Ohio high school group.
Steve Craig. The attorney. You talking about the attorney?
Oh, is it his son?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Steve Craig. And I asked him about it because I go, I said I could probably come up with an idea where you could have the booster club sell basically, pick your 5 favorite players and whoever gets the most stats or most points, and then the money would go to the booster club. But that was still considered gambling and therefore was shot down. I don't think it'll ever happen at a high school level just because of that. It's too gray line, fine line. Like I said, I was even trying to approach the idea that it would be a fundraiser but it was shot down quickly because then people would literally be yelling at players on the field like, I can't believe you lost me $20 this week because you fumbled that ball, you idiot. I'm sure those kids get yelled at enough by parents on the field. They don't need to know that there's money on the line for it. That's for sure. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm really frustrated this week with who should I start experts.
Got it.
It's awful. But anyway, do you have a website that you could recommend that are pretty good with, the who should I start, it's Fantasy Pro or Roller, or do you have one that seems to be better than another?
I mean, they're all very good in their own right. But one thing I will always say is, 1, get as much data as you can, and 2, make sure you make the decision. One of the worst things that happens in the fantasy world is people rely too much on experts. And you're hearing one up here saying this. But it's your team, not my team. If you want to email me anytime, like I said, I'll give out it's bob@bigguyfantasysports.com. I would be more than happy to share why I would think this person over this person. My consistency model will actually show you that data as well on the Big Guy website. But sometimes those are very tough decisions. You have 2 very equal players and equal matchups, and yeah, I get it. Been doing this for 40 years. I get it.
One more question. I have McCaffrey. Should I drop him?
If you have, she's asking if she should draft Christian McCaffrey. If you have an IR spot that you can keep him, keep him.
Okay.
But I've been playing in some leagues that they have eliminated the IR spots, which is injured reserve, and that's brutal because then you have to decide, am I going to take up a bench spot for him for 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, who knows? But yeah, if you have an IR spot, leave him there. Can you do trades in your league?
Yes.
So one thing you might want to think about is, especially if your team's starting off a little slow, is looking at somebody that's like 3-0 and trying, huh?
Like me.
Oh, you're 3-0?
Oh, yeah.
You're undefeated with McCaffrey out?
No, no.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, wait a minute, why are you asking me that question?
I also have Cooper Hall.
Cooper Kupp?
He's
yeah.
gonna go, and I have Hill. I got 3 that are, I can't
Yeah.
really-
So what I would probably do is send out a message to your league that all 3 of them are available for trade for the best offers. No, I'm not joking. This is a very serious comment. Because what will happen is people will jump at those players, but make sure you get at least 2 good players for the very 1 good player. That's not helping you. Because at that point, you just created your team with a lot of depth, and then you take off and you head towards the playoffs. Now, they may get Kupp or McCaffrey back, but you now have 6 good players because you traded them all 2 for 1 that you're going in. So if one of your guys do get hurt, you've got a good replacement, and you need that depth to get through into the playoffs and through the playoffs. Because I can't tell you how many times I've made the playoffs, made it to the finals, played against a team, and all of a sudden all my guys get hurt, and I didn't have the depth. It's tough. So, yeah, I like to wheel and deal. Frank doesn't trade with me ever because he can't rip me off. Anybody else? Yes.
How do you become an expert in this field?
How do you become an expert? You tell everybody that you're an expert, and then you can stand up and do speeches in front of others. I can sell it because I've been doing this. I've been playing for 40 years, and I've been writing the consistency model for 20. I certainly didn't feel like I was an expert in 2002 when I created the concept. But then again, there wasn't that many experts back then anyway. But really, it's, and I always say nationally recognized. Anybody can say that they're an expert. Hey, I'm the best at whatever. But if you have to be recognized. So the book has been nominated 7 straight times as one of the best publications in the country. So that kind of stuff is where I kind of feel like, okay, I can say that and look in the mirror and feel good about that. But if you go out on the internet, if you go out on Twitter, everybody's an expert. Everybody wants to sell their stuff and their bets and their picks and their stuff. So you just have to kind of, weed out some of the people. I know who are some of the smartest people in the country, and I'm not one of them. I'm halfway now, maybe. But there's a lot of great people out there that are all, that work for various big sites, NFL.com and ESPN and CBS Sports and all those kind of great sites. There's great people there with great minds. Mike Clay, one of my favorite people from ESPN, Dave Richards from CBS Sports, Andy Behrens from Yahoo. These guys are fantasy sports Hall of Famers, all some of the best. Bob Harris from Football Guys. These are the smartest people, but they also have been around for 25, 30 years and have earned accolades. There is a fantasy sports Hall of Fame. Yes, that is my goal. I'm not sure I'll ever make it. But hey, you got to shoot for it, right? But yes, there's some very smart people out there. And again, they all started the same way I did. They just shared their knowledge, shared their ideas, and got to this point. So, yes, sir.
Do you believe in consequences if you come in last?
Oh, so I don't know if anybody's... So in many leagues, fantasy sports leagues, there are consequences for being in last place. They're usually not very fun if you're the last place person. Now, we haven't done that in our league. Don't get any ideas, Frank. But I've seen things of standing on the corner at one of the biggest intersections wearing a tutu, holding up a sign that says, "I suck at fantasy football." My middle daughter had to drink 12, it's not Zimas, but it's something like that. Anyway, 12 these nasty drinks.
High noons or something.
High noons or something. And she had to do it in a 12-hour period. Now, see, I don't see that as a bad thing. But, hey, whatever. To each his own. But, yeah, again, all kinds of things. People get toilet seats that says they're the toilet bowl winner, and it can get brutal. I mean, there are some out there that really can be ugly. I think another one I heard was they had to go to a Waffle House and they had to sit there for 24 hours straight, which is bad enough. You could cut the number of hours you had to sit there, 1 hour for every waffle that you would eat. So if you could eat 24 waffles, you could get out scot-free. But that's a lot of waffles, and I'm not sure if you throw it up, you have to restart. But anyway, that's another one that I've heard. So there could be some brutal last place consequences. So yeah, thank you for that question. Great one. All right.
You know, tell them about how the book came about.
Oh, the book. So yeah, so the consistency guide came about because I was being asked to write an article in a lot of the magazines that were on the shelves every year by my fellow people that recognized that it was a unique and very thought-provoking concept. And so I've been in like 23 magazines over 21 years. And I always ask these people, look, is there a way that I can share this knowledge, that we can put like the player profiles and we can add the consistency data for them? And they're like, no, we don't have enough room. And then so in 2016, somebody said, well, on Amazon, you can self-publish your own book. Oh, okay. So I did. And if anybody didn't know that, you can write your own book, upload it to Amazon and sell it. So I did. First year I sold 65 copies. And I was pretty ecstatic. I'm like, oh, this is fun. At my peak, which is the last few years, I've sold anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 copies. So it's a nice side thing. But really the other thing is then it pushes people to my website for then the seasonal subscriptions to it. So it's kind of kind of helps each other out. But I just decided that, look, I wanted to share this information, and it is black and white inside. So, I mean, there's no color. If you're buying this book for pretty pictures of Aaron Rodgers and Baker Mayfield and that, you're not going to get any of that. It's black and white because it costs extra to print and color inside the book. So for me to sell it at a reasonable price for people to afford it, everything inside is pretty much black and white, PDF kind of thing. And like I said, I've been recognized last year, again, nominated for the 7th straight year. And the other 3 magazines I was competing against was NBC Sports, CBS Sports, and Yahoo. Yeah, I didn't think I had much chance either, but just to be mentioned and honored to be chosen to be nominated with those 3 companies really means a lot, and I take that as a win every year. So I tell people I've won 7 straight years. I don't care if it's only 1 or not, but I'm proud that it even gets nominated every year. So, all right, how are we doing on time?
Good.
Good. Anybody else?
Plug the Expo and tell them what the whole weekend is like.
Okay, so the Fantasy Football Expo, like I said, is every year the weekend after the Pro Football Hall of Fame weekend. We actually have a 3-day event, which I pretty much learned from the Hall of Fame weekend themselves. So we have a Friday night party down in Centennial Plaza at Jersey's. We have a cornhole tournament. It's a lot of fun. Everybody comes, drinks, eats food, plays cornhole, and it's just a lot of catching up, kind of the kickoff to the weekend. On Saturday, we do the King's Classic Draft, which is the best of the best in the Pro Football Hall of Fame Museum. We also do other drafts that people can join in from out of town. It's just for fun, just play. People just love to draft. They love to do that. We also, probably this coming year, going to do a Madden tournament, but we've also done flag football tournament, as I mentioned. Also on Saturday and Saturday night, we have a party in the stadium where we all meet down in the end zone, and we usually have a beer pong tournament then. A lot of competition. You know how, as guys are, we'll play tiddlywinks against each other for blood, so it's a lot of fun. And then Sunday all day is the big Expo day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the Dome, Center for Performance. I always forget which one's which. So it's in the Dome from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do basically an all-day Expo, 50 trade show booths. All the top sites in the country are there, and we have 3 different stages with every kind of topic for fantasy football you can think of. And we videotape them all, put them out on YouTube. So if you want to watch any of them, they're on our Fantasy Football Expo YouTube channel. And there's also a Big Guy Fantasy Sports YouTube channel too. And so, yeah, that's our whole weekend. And then usually we have a karaoke party on Sunday night because these people love karaoke. So we always have that as well. It's a great time. Anybody who works downtown, George's, all those bars, Arcadia Net, they love us because these guys all leave the DoubleTree at about midnight and they just romp through the town. They fill up George's where there's like 70 people in there. And they love it. They love going to there and Arcadia and all the different bars down there. And just hanging out and having fun. A lot of these guys treat it like their college, like a college frat party reunion, and they just have a lot of fun. And you know, but we also talk a lot of fantasy football. That's pretty much a lot of the conversation. But it's just a blast, and it's only $75 for the whole weekend for those folks to do that. I try to make it very cost effective. One of the things that I went to back in 2012, I was working for a site called Roto Experts, and they put on a fantasy football convention at the Atlantic City Convention Center in Atlantic City. It was huge, but the problem was that they also had an autograph session in the back of the thing, and so it was $90 per day to get in. A booth, I think, was like $2,000. Fantasy sites had to pay like $2,000 to get a booth, but the problem is everybody walked in the door, paid their $90, walked in the door with all of their memorabilia, walked straight to the back of the room, got their autographs, and walked straight back out. Needless to say, it was a disaster. Now, I didn't have to put any money into it. I just worked for the company, so it didn't bother me. But I learned from that to make sure, one, it's cost effective for the people, because 90% of the fantasy community, people that actually put out content, are like me. They have a full-time job, it's a passion they have, they don't have that kind of money to throw around. So when I decided to put this in Canton, Ohio, which was always my dream, because one, it's the best city in the country for this, right? Was that I wanted it to be cost effective for these vendors. A lot of new people. Last year we had 60% new vendors. It means they'd never been here before. And so they had heard, hey, for only $475, I can go and get a booth for the whole weekend, and I got 750 rabid fantasy football fans coming, and people love it because they get very quick exposure to a lot of big players in the industry. A lot of them have got jobs. A lot of them have got investors. So it really makes me feel good because I had people back in the day that helped me move forward. So I'm just paying it forward to these folks to say, hey, come to Canton, bring your cool stuff, and share it. And from that, you'll grow, you'll tell more people. And so, we've hit 750 attendees 3 years in a row. And people are like, well, are you disappointed it didn't grow? No, when I hear 60% of them are new people, that tells me that people are talking. And some year, they're all gonna show up and there's gonna be like 2,000 people. We'll worry about that one. My wife will have a heart attack at that point. Because she's my COO during the weekend, makes it run very smoothly. So, but yeah, so that's a lot about the Expo. One more question. Did you? No? Okay. One more? Good. Yes?
About your wife's league, is she in the league?
I have no comment to the press at this time. I like to take the fifth. She tried 1 year. It did not go well for her. But that's because she's very stubborn. And she didn't listen to the expert that lived in her house. Because, damn it, she can make her own decisions. All right. Once again, folks, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.